Here in California, bond ratings are in the toilet, and the state can't pay its bills. Government employees are being laid off, and union employees are mobilizing their forces to prevent the raiding of their lucrative pension plans. The elected officials are between a rock and a hard place, so the elected officials have finally decided to take urgent action. What did they do? They called a hearing so that they could get together and talk to themselves and pretend like they were trying to solve the problem. Naturally, full disclosure was there. We're over here across the street from the Museum of Tolerance, where the Senate Select Committee and Assembly Committees just held a hearing on the subject of government reforms.
I think that what the committee really did up there was a dog and pony show. It's what I would call a dog and pony show.
They tried to prevent full disclosure from recording the hearing, but when KTLA showed up, they couldn't stop us without stopping them. So we got inside with our cameras. What did we get for our efforts? Hours of meaningless drivel.
One of the principles that I've come to realize...
In the instances where there were outcomes established, was there a change in the legislative and the political cultures? Because I at least am sensing, and maybe I'm just hopefully just too hopeful.
And I've been on budget committee before and in budget subcommittee hearings. I don't understand the issues I'm voting on. I mean, it's absurd.
The thing I would say here is that any fundamental change is going to incur resistance.
We are running a little long because we're having an important conversation.
They spent hours talking to themselves, and after an eternity of government babble, they allowed the people in the attendance only 15 minutes for public comment. But the public wasn't having any of that dog and pony show. Instead of discussing the mundane bureaucratic speak, the public gave the legislators a piece of their mind. It's government corruption. That's the problem in California, not the overtaxed public. Interestingly, the ire of the public focused on the courts.
Before we talk about taxes and budgets and those sort of things, let's talk about the corruption and the waste.
Our judicial system is the most corrupt judicial system in the nation, in Los Angeles, California. You need to know that.
The audience was aware of the jailed Mr. Richard Fine, who has sounded the clarion call identifying the illegal payments being made to the L.A. Superior Court judges.
Some of you up here, go talk to Mr. Fine in court, and let's solve our legal problem, and let's get rid of these illegally paid judges.
With regards to this particular hearing, when talking about government reform, oversight, and cost savings, I think I would agree with this gentleman here that the courts are really a place to look. I think we need additional oversight over the courts, which with as much money as they get from our state budget.
You have no clue how uptight the voters are. There will be pitchforks taken out in June of 2010, I promise you.
I do agree with this gentleman about Richard Fine. He did uncover that there was double charging of extra legal benefits they were charging both the counties and the states. He was jailed for it.
Gabriella Halt brought up the nefarious vote taken during the budget debate that supposedly made the payments to the judges legal.
Senator Steinberg, who interestingly enough convened this committee with Assemblywoman Bass, introduced SB X 211, which approves supplemental pay and benefits of judges throughout the state, in direct contradiction to an appellate court decision, Sturgeon versus the County of Los Angeles, which made these payments illegal.
And it involved introducing an ex post facto law, which is against the California Constitution and the federal Constitution.
This SB 2X11 was passed on a weekend extraordinary session, and the only one I would blame is Senator Steinberg, who put it in there.
It was apparent that the attendees were disappointed by the meaningless committee hearing.
You gentlemen are basically, what you're telling us here today, those of us that didn't fall asleep, you're rearranging the chairs on the Titanic.
We spoke with Gabriella Halt, who is the president and CEO of the Citizens for California Reform, to get her reaction. She was unimpressed by this hearing that was supposed to be all about government reform.
They got up there and they said some really nice language: zero-based budgeting, performance-based budgeting, responsibility, changing the culture. You know, all those buzzwords that people say over and over and over. Oh, we're really going to get reform. We're going to get a balanced budget. They're going to do all these things. People don't know what that means.
She clearly and succinctly identified the problem.
And the fact of the matter is, those legislators don't listen to the people. They listen to themselves and they listen to their special interests. They're doing this whole reform because there's all these reform movements out there right now. And it's, you know, if they don't start talking about it on the inside, it's going to come from the outside. Well, little do they know it's coming from the outside anyway.
Well, I noticed that the chairman, Mike Feuer, tried to cut you off a couple of times. Do you feel that you had adequate time to say what you had to say?
Absolutely not. They had a dozen panelists. They had 90 minutes scheduled for their presentation. They took 2.5 hours. A dozen people. So about a dozen people lined up to speak, and they got 15 minutes. The public gets 15 minutes, and the dog and pony gets 2.5 hours. Last I saw, that the legislators and the staffers work for the people. We don't work for them. And frankly, it should have been the other way around. They should have done a succinct presentation and then opened it up to the public and allowed them to speak as long as they needed to speak. But what's interesting to me is generally when you have public hearings, you have it in a public place, you know, open to the public so anybody can come in. Coming into somewhere where it's very guarded and you know, very secured and very controlled, where the public just really doesn't have as easy as access to, is very interesting to me. Why they didn't hold it at City Hall, the County Board of Supervisors, you know, Hahn Building of Administration. We got lots of public buildings.
So in other words, you kind of think the reason they had it here at this private facility is to limit the amount of public participation?
I believe that to be true, yes. I believe that to be true. You're a public agency, you're having a public hearing.
She brings up an interesting point. There was little public notice, and as we found out, it was tightly controlled. Was the lack of audience attendance designed on purpose?
We have changes in administrations and leadership.
So in other words, you kind of think the reason they had it here at this private facility is to limit the amount of public participation?
I believe that to be true, yes. I believe that to be true. You're a public agency, you're having a public hearing, you know, where was the 72-hour notice, you know, for the public? I mean, where was the information? And where's the public access?
We asked her what she thought the legislators learned from the hearing. Looking at all the people that testified today, what do you think was the message that came out of the testimony from the public?
I think the primary concern of the people who testified was the judiciary system on a number of things. You know, the corruption in the courts, you know, questions on decisions, and just who's overseeing the courts, and why is it that it seems that the courts are virtually left without any oversight or any way for people to come forward and express their concerns. That was an overwhelming sort of tenor of almost every person that spoke, I believe.
We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Please respond to our survey and leave your comments below. Number 1. Do you think that corruption in the judiciary is a major problem in California? Yes or no? Number 2. Do you think it's government bureaucracy that's the major problem in California? Yes or no? Or number 3. Is it the legislators and the elected officials that are the problem in California? Yes or no? Be sure to leave your comments below. I'm Leslie Dutton. Thank you.